Welcome back to Inquiring Minds. My name is Doug, and thanks for joining me for another Pen Resurrection Sunday. Usually on Pen Resurrection Sunday, I'll have a vintage pen to show you in its completely dead state and then attempt to resurrect it to a new life of fine writing. But today we have something different. Some of you may know that I'm a big fan of the YouTube channel Adrian's Digital Basement, where Adrian restores vintage computers to working and sometimes not so working condition. People send Adrian boxes and boxes of computer stuff, from video cards to motherboards. Now and then on his second channel, he'll rummage through a box or two of vintage computer parts to see what's to be recycled, what might go into their parts bin, and what he might be able to restore. And thanks to pen friend Janice, today we're going to look at a bag o' pens.
Oh, this is the best pizza in a cup ever. This guy's unbelievable. He ran the old cup of pizza guy out of business.
At last week's pen club, Janice presented me with a bag of pens and pen parts that she gathered up from her various pen junk drawers, wondering if I might be interested. Well, of course I'm interested. Thanks, Janice. Let's see what Janice has been hanging on to for years, shall we? So the first thing out of the bag, and the piece of resistance, I think, of the whole collection is this, Sheaffer's. Now this came with the original box, and the box is from the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. It says Sheaffer's on it, and it is a Sheaffer Snorkel. Now this might be a Statesman, I'm not sure. It might be a, well, there's a number of things it can be. It says Sheaffer, made in Canada. It has a chrome and gold cap with a white dot, so it's a Sheaffer white dot, and it is a Snorkel. I restored one of these already and sold it, but this is a beautiful little pen, and it has some very fine imprint on it that says W.A. Sheaffer Pen Co. of Canada Limited, Goderich, Ontario, made in Canada, in case you didn't know. That Goderich, Ontario is in Ontario, Canada, and the cap itself says Sheaffer's, made in Canada. There, that just confirms it 3 times. This pen was made in Canada. And there is the 14 karat gold tubular nib, two-tone, and it says Sheaffer's, made in Canada, 14K585. And of course the Snorkel extends when you turn the blind cap, and then you retract the touchdown filler. You put the Snorkel in the ink, not the nib, and you push down on the touchdown. It creates a vacuum, sucks up ink. This one has a small crack right there. Whether that'll affect it or not, I don't know. Part, and there are the guts. The first thing I check on these touchdown fillers is whether there's a seal or not. You put this up to your lips and push that in and out, and you can feel some suction. And I feel none. So that means that seal is gone. And here is the unit itself, the filler unit, and the Snorkel's coming right out of the nib unit, and that spring comes right off. And just going to check to see whether that sac has any spring to it at all. No, it's absolutely petrified, and in fact I broke it. So that Snorkel unit needs to be taken apart. The Snorkel itself looks like it's a little bit separated. I'm not sure whether that will work or not, but I'll order a Snorkel kit to replace the seals and the sac. Inside that sac protector, there's a seal right inside there that seals around that Snorkel tube, and then there's another seal the back of the touchdown unit, and then there is of course the sac inside here. So we will see whether I can restore this pen. I've done one before. You can see that restoration and review by clicking right up here. Put this back together again for later until the supplies arrive to fix it. But everything else seems to be working nicely, and that nib looks like a fine, and the tines are in perfect shape. So just a little bit of cleaning up and to see whether that touchdown and Snorkel will work again. So this is definitely on the to-do list for restoration. Let's go back to the bag and see what else is here. So here is a bag marked Vintage Pens by Janice, and there's 3 pens happening in here. One says Parker Parkette, and this one says Parker Parkette Conklin Endura. And this looks like a mechanical pencil, but it has a lever on it. Why would a pencil have a lever on it? It is called an Arnold, USA. Interesting celluloid cracked ice pen pencil. Oh, well, There you go. Let's see what that says. It says signature, and it's a little, probably not gold, steel nib. This does not come off easily, so that's celluloid. We'll have to heat that off. It feels springy. Maybe it has a sac inside there. That nib unit doesn't come off, and that's very thick. That's 1mm lead right there. So there's a definite possibility for restoration. This Arnold fountain pen pencil combo. Now let's look at this possibly Conklin Endura. Okay, here's the nib unit. This has no markings on it. That can be read. No, I don't see anything on it. Lots of Old Sac inside. That lever, the lever does work. Really nice green celluloid. Art Deco style clip. Cap band is missing, but this says Enduro, and it is a steel, gold-plated steel, because all that gold is pretty much off of there. But the nib looks to be in pretty good shape, so maybe that nib unit section doesn't belong to this pen. I'm not sure. But you can file that down, or I can file that down, put a new sac in it, and we have a new fountain pen, a new old fountain pen. So we'll put that away as a possibility. So that goes over there in that pile. And let's look at this Parkette. It's a beautiful rose cracked ice celluloid, black top and bottom finials. This looks like from the 1930s to me, 1930s, early 1940s, something like that. And what does it say here? It says made in Parkette, Canada. Nothing on the cap. And it has a Parkette 14 karat gold Canada nib. And the nib is totally borked. Look at that. Yeah, twisted beyond all recognition.
Foobar. Foobar. Y'all got that right.
Yeah, I looked up foobar in the German dictionary. There's no foobar in there.
Papa.
Yes, sir.
It's possible to clip that off and make a stub out of it. See whether the section comes up. Yeah, it does. All the Old Sac inside there. Crunchy guts. But that's a real candidate for restoration, because that's a nice gold nib. That could be a stub. That'll be interesting. I'll put that back in the to restore pile. Let's see what else we have in the bag. Now this one was interesting. This, the tag says, I read the tag before, but I haven't looked at the pen yet. Rare vintage 1960s Conway Stewart 570 Dinkie fountain pen, made in Lumina blue with gold trim, 14 karat gold nib. $50. Well, for $50 it better be a nice pen. And here's the pen. Lumina blue, all right. Look at that. That's like galaxy blue. Isn't that gorgeous? This tiny little pen. The lever mechanism works okay. There's the remnants of sac on the end of that. And there's the 14 karat gold nib. Oh, and the feed comes out. Let's pull that out. Plastic feed and tiny, tiny, tiny little nib. Let's see what this nib says. It says Conway 14 CT gold. It's not even big enough to put Stewart on there. But the interesting thing is, let's see if I can get closer. The interesting thing is that's a stub. It's an oblique, left oblique stub in gorgeous condition. I think I need to restore this almost first. Look at that section. Isn't that gorgeous? It is in my hand. Let's compare it to something else. I've got a Metro here. Let's put the Metropolitan there and put the Dinkie there. Look at the size of my Dinkie. It doesn't even get up to the size of a Metro. It's so tiny. It has what looks like a Waterman style semi-hooded nib unit. Metro with its number 5 size nib, and there's the Dinkie with its minuscule nib. In the hand, that's a lovely little pen. Someone's going to really enjoy that. That's definitely in the to-do list. And let's see, here is a bag with a Made in Canada Waterman's lever filler, cap and barrel only. That's that beautiful azure blue, but the lever's there, clip is gone, and the nib unit and section are gone. I've restored one of these already and sold it in this beautiful blue. You can see that review by clicking up there. This will go in the parts bin. And what do we have here? Statesman fountain pen, nib unit, barrel, gold metal cap, and a section. Statesman, let's see what it says. It says Statesman fountain pen, Reg A 16962 Tokyo, assembled in Canada, and it's a Japanese copy of the Parker 51. Aerometric, specialty made highest quality. The sac seems to be okay. Let's take a look at the nib. Not so okay. That's rough. It seems to be sprung and it's missing the tipping on that one tine. And I don't think it's gold. It says H-I-G-H-O, Hio. Not Ohio, just Hio. Hooded section is faceted. That's interesting. Yeah, it's too rough to try to get it back together again. I think I'll leave this in pieces. This is a possibility. I'd have to cut that off, unspring those tines, and see whether I can cut it into a small stub or something like that. $18. That's a possible. No section, feed, or nib. Just the cap and barrel on Bankers Pen, USA. Plastic, cracked. Or is that faceted? Oh, that's faceted. It looks like cracks. And the clip, yeah, the riveted clip is loose. So that's in the parts bin. What do we have here? We have a bag o' nibs. Possibly the nib units for the Pelikan M120 and M400 NN with a Mertz and Corral nib unit 60s to 70s. Now let's take a look at what we have here. It looks like the original nib containers from Pelikan. IF. Would that be italic fine? It's my guess. This one has no marking on it. IM, italic medium. And they are indeed Pelikan medium, and they are italics. It's steel, gold-plated steel. Doesn't even look like gold-plated, gold-colored steel. Nib units for the M120 and M400 and ends. Well, if I ever see any of those pens, these will be useful. They're all italics. This is a broad italic, the one that wasn't marked. This is a fine italic, and this is another fine italic. 4 interesting nibs. This one says Eclipse, question mark. Needs a nib. Don't we all? The clip says Waltham, USA. Waltham. No nib. Broken feed. It must be a button filler. ER stamped into it. That's it. The blind cap won't come off. There's an ink window there too. Oh, there it goes. It's got to be a button filler. That's seized. Okay, well that goes in the parts bin. Vintage, unmarked fountain pen, $25. This is lovely ivory celluloid. There's no markings on it whatsoever. Nice finials. The lever seems to work. And this one says Eclipse. So I'm wondering whether this got mismatched. This is the Eclipse, and whether that one belongs here and this one belongs here. Well, maybe not, because it says this one needs a nib. It has a sac in it. It's pretty well shot. It says Eclipse, Iridium, Tipped Canada. That's a steel nib, and the nib has been dropped, so that needs some attention. We'll put it over here with the possibles. Eagle Vintage Fountain Pen needs a cap. The sac needs to be glued back on. Maybe we can mix and match a cap from something else. That's a steel gold-plated nib. The nib looks okay. Has a sac in it. Yeah, it doesn't need to be glued back on. It needs a new sac. See whether some of these other parts might fit. Nope. Thought I might get lucky. And what is this? This says just Imperial. It's a smart looking pen. $10. So this says Imperial. Down the clip. Gold plated pen, it looks like. It's a Parker 51 clone. It's a Parker Vacumatic clone. Well, that's interesting. And whether that's supposed to have a clutch on it or not, I don't know. This needs to be heated to get it apart. The nib looks like it's in fairly good shape. Needs a little bit of adjusting. I believe it's gold-plated steel, and we'll have to get it apart to find out. But an interesting Vacumatic clone to see whether the parts are the same size as a regular Vacumatic. Imperial, to do a little research on what that might be. So that's a to-do. And we're down to the last bit here. This is called Maru Pen. This is just a pen part. It's a nib and a converter. So what do we have here? There's some Japanese script. Maru Pen stationery, EF. Steel nib, plastic feed, push-pull converter. So I have no idea what that fits into, so that will go into the parts pen. Again, in any of this, if you guys recognize anything here at all, you let me know in the comments below and guide me to whether this is junk or it is actually a treasure that Janice has found. And speaking of finds, I should add to this bag o' pens a couple of things that I've found, just a couple. I went across town to get this, thinking it was a better pen than it is. but it is a Sheaffer Imperial II. And I can tell that because it says Sheaffer Imperial II on the sticker, on the original sticker that's on there. And it says it's a fine. So this is a Sheaffer white dot, plastic pen, chrome cap, tiny clip, and there is the Sheaffer classic inlaid nib. It says USA on the tail. It says Sheaffer registered. It's steel. It's not gold at all. It is a aerometric style Sheaffer converter, but will take Sheaffer cartridges or a Sheaffer converter. This is one that I'm going to look to restore as well. The nib's in pretty good shape. It just needs some cleaning and some ink to make that work. And I just received this the other day. This is a Parker 1947 Parker Vacumatic in silver pearl, very transparent silver pearl, and it is the Debutante size. This is a small pen, so this comes up at 118.3 millimeters or 4.6 inches, and it's in beautiful shape. It's got a couple of scratches and gouges on it. There's one there. I haven't got it apart yet. This is very, very dirty, and there's no sac in there, but the barrel is very transparent, and the nib needs some work, but both tines are intact, and so that's going to restore up very, very nicely. So I'm looking forward to that. There is the bag o' pens. Thank you, Janice, for the bag o' pens. I've got a bunch of parts and I've got a bunch of to-dos to keep me busy and out of trouble for the next number of weeks. So look forward to seeing some of those pen resurrections of some of those to-do pens right there. That group right there is going to be restored real soon now. After filming the bag of pens and pen parts, I fell in love with this little Conway Stewart Dinkie. I did some research on it, and this is a collectible little pen. The Conway Stewart Dinkie model has a long history, but these semi-hooded versions without the designation Dinkie on the barrel, but a barrel imprint that says Holder Foreign on it, which means that the parts except for the nib were made in Germany, I suspect, and then assembled in Britain. And these Holder Foreign versions were actually Dinkies, but they were part of the Lumina series with this very vibrant acrylic. I found various colors of this same model of pen selling for some pretty amazing prices. This pen could have been made anywhere between 1964 and 1972. I had a sac that fit the pen and decided to give it a full treatment and film the process for you. And here it is now. So I thought that since I already have the Dinkie apart, that I'd go ahead and try to resac the pen and restore the pen to working condition. It doesn't need too much. We need to dig the old sac out of there and get that lever working again and replace the sac. This is a number 16, which fits the stem of this section perfectly, and I need to get the old sac off of that stem right there. So I'm going to sort of chip it off with my X-Acto blade. Yeah, that isn't looking too bad now. I'll probably rough it up a little bit with some 400 grit sandpaper. Get some of the last of that really old petrified shellac and sac off of that to have a new surface to grip the new sac on. Now we have to get that old sac out of there. See that the lever is cracking off some of it. See, most of it's falling out. There we go. I think that's probably the majority of it. So I popped the barrel and the cap in the ultrasonic jewelry cleaner in some pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia. And they've come up very nicely. All the remnants of sac are out of there. And I've taken some 400 grit flexible sandpaper to that stem right there. So now what we have to do is measure this sac with the barrel to see how much it needs to be trimmed. And it's fitting in there just snug. So that needs to be trimmed right to there where the section fits in to the barrel. I'll mark that spot with my thumbnail, not rocket science, and we'll trim it off right there. And then we'll give it a test. I think that might be a little bit, yeah, needs to be a little shorter. Always easier to trim off a little bit more than it is to add. Yeah, because that barrel narrows right there so it can post. So that looks about right. That's nice. Okay, so while I've got the feed out, I'm going to clean it up. It looks a little rough. I don't know whether that's just distorted or whether someone melted it or something. It just looks a little rough. I'll just sand that down a little bit. But I'm going to make sure that that channel right through there is open. There. Just score it a little bit with my X-Acto blade, and that should be good to go. Let's reinstall that sack. There we go. So it might take a size smaller, maybe a 15 would have been a little bit better. It should work. It fits into the barrel nicely. But I'm going to polish up that nib before I insert it so I can get it nice and shiny. And there we go. Look at that. It's quite lovely. I can't wait to see how that writes, because that looks like a lovely little oblique stub to me. So we'll fit the feed to the nib just about there, and we'll fit it into the section. It goes in fairly easily. I'm not sure how much it needs to go, because that feed sticks right out into the sack. I'm going to put it down just like that. We'll see whether that works, how much that feed sits inside that sack. Hopefully we won't have any draw problems. Make sure that that draw is open. And I'm going to check the nib alignment, because sometimes that feed pushes the nib alignment around. Yeah, it seems to be pushing it. This feed is warped somehow. See, it's slightly out of tubular form. So when it goes into the section, it sort of pushes those tines around. The tines are perfect right now, absolutely perfect. But when I put it in the section, maybe I shouldn't put it in so far. I'll leave the breather hole free, and we'll see whether that works. Seems to be aligned better now. So we'll do that. So let's get some shellac and some talc and resack this pen. My shellac brush from the inky nib, and we're just going to paint that little stem right there. I'm not going to get any on that feed or on the spot that the section goes into the barrel. And then I'm just going to, I don't need a sack spreader because it's going right on. Just give it a little bit of a twist and just add a little bit more to that seam. There we go. Now we'll let that dry overnight, and then we'll add some talc, put it in the barrel, and we can test out the pen. Okay, it's the next morning, and the shellac has dried completely, and so now we're going to talc this up so we can slide our sack into our Dinkie. That's what she said. A little bit of talc on here. There we go. This is a tight fit, so lots of talc. No, I'm not making rude movements. I'm just trying to spread it evenly so it doesn't kink. That's the one thing we don't want to have, is a kink in our sack. And then I'm going to use a little bit of gripper material just to ease it into the section here. It doesn't want to go. So that's very, very tight. I'm just going to try a touch of silicone oil where that section goes in. That working better. Now I want to line up that lever. There we go. There. I think that works perfectly. And there we go. So now all we have to do is fill it up with some ink and try out that nib to see how nice it writes. We'll get out some Waterman ink and take our Dinkie for a dunk. There we go. It's so small, it's hard to fit inside there. I'm getting bubbles. And one more time for luck. Third time's the charm. I'm sure we want to post this because that's so small, it's barely writable like that in my medium-sized hands. There we go. Get out some Clairefontaine here, and let's give this a try. Well, it certainly is a stub. That's no pressure at all. And so this is a, I'm going to call it a circa 1960 Conway Stewart Dinkie 570. And it has what I would call a medium stub, 14 karat gold. And the line variation, let's see if we can get some line variation out of it. Yeah, so that was no pressure at all. This is with some pushing. So it has some flair to it. Now this is very toothy. Lots of feedback. It's not scratchy, but it's very toothy. I think I might polish this a little bit. I have to just make sure that it's aligned It's slightly misaligned, so I'm going to work on that and see whether I can get it writing a little bit smoother. Well, I polished it up with a little 8,000 grit and then 12,000 grit micromesh, and it's writing very, very smoothly now. Very, very wet as well. So I'm going to go ahead and polish this up with some micromesh and polish up that hardware with my jewelry cloth. As the micro scratches aren't all that deep in this acrylic, there's some cap abrasions right there. I'm going to start in the middle of my chart here at 3600 instead of all the way down here, and see whether I can get those out with the finer grades first. Almost getting it out, so I'm going to go step back to 3200 grit, see whether I can get them all the way out. I'm going to move on back to the 3600 and then move up from there. And as I move up to 4000 grit, I'll start going over the entire surface. Well, I showed you how I resacked and polished this pen. What I didn't show you was that after I had sacked the pen and wrote with it, I wrote with it for a while, and it stopped feeding ink. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that when I pushed the nib and feed deeply into the section, the tines became slightly misaligned and kind of pigeon-toed. If the tines are like this, they're square because it's a stub, it kind of was like this, with the two tines sort of facing into each other and being wider at the bottom than they were at the top. I know you're not supposed to make fun of pigeons anymore, and it is their God-given right to walk with their toes pointed together and their knees knocking into each other and their pants and underwear hanging about their thighs, but I still think they look stupid. It was obvious that the nib and the feed were too far into that section. I had already shellacked the sac to the section, and I couldn't withdraw the nib from the front, so I peeled off the sac, reset the nib and feed, and re-shellacked the sac back on again. And now, as you can see, the tines are perfectly aligned, and the pen writes very, very nicely indeed. I'm most impressed that a tiny little pen like this has such a lovely 14 karat gold nib, but especially an oblique italic stub. It's kind of between an italic and a stub, the way it writes. The acrylic is just stunning with its deep blue chatoyancy. And there you have it. Thanks go out to pen friend Janice for donating the bag of pens to my channel and for this little gem of a pen. I think I'll bring it with me when Win and I have lunch with Janice and her husband tomorrow. Perhaps she'll fall in love with it and take it back. As always, thanks for watching, and that's all she wrote.
I made this.